All right. Yeah. So I'm just going to go by the script that I have for the service. So I'm a member and my name is Anu. I usually like to do this kind of gathering a year or so. It's just an idea to know, like, I don't read a lot of reviews or anything, but I like to know what are the new books people are reading, what are the great books there are. So that's the real thing. Of course, I would like to welcome all of you and all the members, and let's keep it one meeting now. As we know, we'll be recording this session on Zoom. Welcome to everybody on Zoom. And is there anybody who is unfamiliar to the ethical culture? But anyway, I'll read it for you. So we are a non-theistic congregation movement about 150 years ago, dedicated to exploring the ways in which we can live meaningful and ethical lives. Unlike a traditional religious group, there is no supernatural component to our services. But that said, there is no requirement to believe or not believe in our movement. That's a matter between you and your conscience. Our motto is deed before creed. We believe that how we act in the life is more important than any creed you might espouse. So let's start. And what we will do is we'll do two people from the room and then one person from the Zoom. So the idea, everybody knows, I'm going to say it in one statement, that you want to talk about a book that you read recently, you liked it, you wanted to share, you wanted to tell people why you liked it. If you want to read a para or two, we have a very good turnout, so let's not take more than 5 minutes each, and let's start. You want to start? You have a book? Can everybody just state their name when they start and go ahead?
Okay. I'll see if I can hold it in my lap while I'm holding this. Sure. When Orion spoke recently about racism in America, he mentioned on his book list a book I thought was one of the best I've ever read, Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. She talks about systemic racism in this country, and boy, does she explain it. And she makes a parallel between what we do here and the caste system in India, and also how the Nazis treated the Jews. So that's the lines that she draws. So I just want to read one story she has in the epilogue toward the end of her book. In December 1932, one of the smartest men who ever lived landed in America on a steamship with his wife and their 30 pieces of luggage as the Nazis bore down on their homeland of Germany. Albert Einstein, the physicist and Nobel laureate, had managed to escape the Nazis just in time. The month after Einstein left, Hitler was appointed chancellor. In America, Einstein was astonished to discover that he had landed in yet another caste system, one with a different scapegoat caste and different methods, but with embedded hatreds that were not so unlike the one he had just fled. The worst disease is the treatment of the Negro, he wrote in 1946. Everyone who freshly learns of this state of affairs at a maturer age feels not only the injustice, but the scorn of the principle of the fathers who founded the United States, that all men are created equal. He could hardly believe that a reasonable man can cling so tenaciously to such prejudice, he said. He and his wife Elsa settled in Princeton, New Jersey, where he took a professorship at the university and observed firsthand the oppression faced by Black residents who were consigned to the worst parts of town, to segregated movie houses, to servant positions, and were, in the words of his friend Paul Robeson, forced into bowing and scraping to the drunken rich. A few years into his tenure, the opera singer Marian Anderson, a renowned contralto born to the subordinated caste, performed to an overflow crowd at McCarter Theater in Princeton, and to rapturous praise in the press of her complete mastery of a magnificent voice. But the Nassau Inn in Princeton refused to rent a room to her for the night. Einstein, learning of this, invited her to stay at his home. From then on, she would stay at the Einstein residence whenever she was in town, Even after Princeton hotels began accepting African-American guests, they would remain friends until his death. Being a Jew myself, perhaps I can understand and empathize with how Black people feel as victims of discrimination, he told a family friend. He grew uncomfortable with the American way of pressuring newcomers to look down on the lowest caste in order to gain acceptance. Here was one of the most brilliant men who ever lived, refusing to see himself as superior to people he was being told were beneath him. The more I feel an American, the more this situation pains me, Einstein wrote. I can escape the feelings of complicity in it only by speaking out. And so he did. He co-chaired a committee to end lynching. He joined the NAACP. He spoke out on behalf of civil rights activists, lent his fame to their cause. At a certain point in his life, he rarely accepted the many honors that came his way, but in 1946, he made an exception for Lincoln University, a historically Black college in Pennsylvania. He agreed to deliver the commencement address and to accept an honorary degree there. On that visit, he taught his theory of relativity to physics students and played with the children of Black faculty, among them the son of the university president, a young Julian Bond, who would go on to become a civil rights leader. The separation of the races is not a disease of the colored people, Einstein told the graduates at commencement, but a disease of the white people. I do not intend to be quiet about it. He became a passionate ally of the people consigned to the bottom. He hates race prejudice, W.B. Du Bois wrote, because as a Jew, he knows what it is.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? From the room?
This is switching gears a bit. Many of you know that David and I are very interested in the theater. And so I brought a book in called Ghostlight, which is written by Frank Rich, who used to be the theater critic for the New York Times a while ago. And this was written in the year 2000, and I picked it up and read it quite a while ago. I didn't read it in 2000, but after that. And I really loved it. And it's been sitting on my bookshelf, and I picked it up again and started rereading it, realizing again how wonderful a book it is. It's really about his growing up and how he discovered the theater. He's a very good writer, and you really feel as though you're there in the room with him as he's discovering what is so wonderful about the theater. And Ghostlight is referring to, I don't know if you've been to a theater at the end of the show as people leave and the orchestra's packing up and going away. If you're in the theater, they will put a stand with a lit light in the middle of the stage, and that's called the ghost light. And it's okay, the stage is like full of superstitions. So it is to keep the ghosts away. If you don't have a lit light, then the ghosts will come and inhabit the theater. So it's called a ghost light. So he's got this, and I'll read just a little paragraph to give you a sense of the book. Moss Hart had descended upon me unbidden, like an angel, to open up more of the world I was so desperate to see. Act 1, that's the title of Moss Hart's book, had validated my fantasies and speculations, which were as far removed from those of the boys on my block as his were from those boys in his neighborhood, so distant in time and geography from my own. There was a growing group of us, in my head at least. The girl who wanted to run away with the traveling show and carousel, and Tulsa, who wanted who wanted to run away with his act in Gypsy, and now Moss Hart, who, unlike the others with their unknown fates, had realized his goal. His name was in Mom's scrapbook and on my records and in almost every book I could find about the theater. I had no idea how I might accomplish what he had, But now that I had read Act 1, which ended not with the words, "the end," but with an open invitation to intermission, I was left with the inchoate hope that somehow I could do it too. And it's just filled beautifully with those kind of remembrances.
We can go to Zoom now.
Okay, we have 4 hands up, and we'll do 2 this time, and then when we come back later, we'll do 2. So the first 2 will be Teresa Forsman and Terry Karp, and then when we come back later, it will be Lucy Lettuce, followed by myself. So Teresa, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. I hope I don't cough when I'm talking. I'm a little bit under the weather. So I don't have an image of this book because it was something I listened to as an audiobook, but I would recommend Klara and the Sun. Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiquro. He wrote Remains of the Day, which some people might know, especially because it was made into a movie. So Klara and the Sun is about, it's sometime in the future, and it's about, Klara is an embodied artificial intelligence. So she's as much like a person as artificial intelligence has been able to produce. And she becomes the quote unquote AF, which they never tell you, but I believe stands for artificial friend of a teenage girl. And so it's fascinating to have a story told from the point of view of embodied artificial intelligence. And you see, you get how much she's like a human and how much she's like a machine, and how much we have in common with her. So I held my interest mightily. I don't have a passage to read because it was an audiobook. It held my interest mightily, and real brilliant writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. You know, I had the order a little wrong. Actually, Lucy is next. Then when we come back, it'll be Terry and myself. So Lucy, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay, I'm having some trouble with my Zoom software, so I don't know if people can hear me and see me, but
we can hear you and see you.
Very good. Okay, so the book I wanted to talk about is a challenging book. It's called Demon Copperhead. It won the 2023 Pulitzer Prize. Some of you might have read, or at least heard of David Copperfield, which is by Charles Dickens, and deals with institutional poverty and damage to children in London. Demon Copperhead, like David Copperfield, is about institutional poverty and damaged children in Appalachia. The author is Barbara Kingsolver. I think her most famous book, probably Poisonwood Bible, which was a story about a missionary family in the Congo. Anyway, you don't need to have read David Copperfield to enjoy Demon Copperhead, but it adds to the experience because there are a lot of parallels. There are variations on names, similarities, and it's a lot of fun if you have read it, but you don't need to have read it. So as I said, it takes place in the mountains of southern Appalachia. And just as in David Copperfield, that story was about an orphan child. This is about a single, it's about a boy. It's a young boy. It's his growing up story, Bill Dunsruman. It's his growing up. And he's born to a teenage addict mother in a single wide trailer. And this book talks about foster care, child labor, derelict schools, and addiction. As you know, OxyContin, opioids, real big deal in Appalachia, all over the country, but especially there. And their disastrous love affairs and losses. And it's really about the exploitation of the rural working class, the lower classes in regions like Appalachia. So I do have a paragraph that I could read. The first sentence of David Copperfield is "I am born." The first sentence of Demon Copperhead is "First I got myself born." And it's a big book. You're making a commitment if you get it. So I don't necessarily recommend running out and buying it. You might want to take it from the library. It's very touching, poignant. It's very, very sad, but it's also in places hysterically funny. So here's a paragraph. My thinking here, this is Demon Copperhead speaking. My thinking here is to put everything in the order of how it happened, give or take certain intervals of a young man skunked out of his skull box, some dots duly connected. But damn, a kid is a terrible thing to be, in charge of nothing. If you get past that and grown, it's easiest. Oh, wait, if you get past that and grown, it's easiest to forget about the misery and pretend you knew all along what you were doing. Excuse me. Assuming you've ended up someplace you're proud to be. And if not, easier to forget the whole thing, period. So this is going to be option 3, not proud, not forgetting, not easy. So as I say, it's extremely touching. It's very, very sad, very funny. You do have to get used to the pattern of speech, but you get used to that very, very quickly. It's a big book, so it's a commitment, just as David Copperfield is a commitment. And I heartily recommend it. I just finished it about a week ago. It is, without question, the best book that I have read in many, 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 many years. So it's a favorite.
Thank you, Lucy. Back to the meeting house.
Yeah. So who wants to go next?
I don't mind.
Okay.
I'm not going to say too much, but I'll tell you, I have 2 wonderful books here. One is Toujours, Provence. The author wrote A Year in Provence, which already carried me away to Provence. I feel like I'm one of them when I'm reading this book. I'm in Provence. And then, my big mouth doesn't carry. Okay.
To be right into the microphone.
Okay. So the other one, would you please leave your hands off?
Okay. I'll try to behave. Don't eat it.
It's not Under the Tuscan Sun was a movie also, and it also transports me to Tuscany. And I feel as if I'm living there when I'm reading. That's why I love these books. They're travel books, and they put you there into the country, and you're part of that society. Actually, you could do their shopping on Friday night. You could go someplace on Sunday. It's an amazing feeling to be transported to these places. So that's why I recommend them. Have a trip for free to read a book. A trip for free to Europe or someplace else.
Yeah. You got a book. Okay.
The legendary Pine Barrens of New Jersey. There are many books about the Pine Barrens, and each book has its own particular flavor. This one has short stories, and I will read one of them to you. I can find the.
Is it like really short? Because we don't have more than 5 minutes.
Well, it's about, okay, then I won't read it. I'll just tell you what it's about. The sands of the Pine Barrens are very fine. They're as fine as sugar. They're very white. They're as fine as sugar. And they're very special because they're used in glass making. You know, you need the best sand makes the best glass. So God made a deal with the devil. And he told the devil to count each grain of sand, wash it, and pile it up. And when he gets done, he will have the souls of the people living there. So naturally, Lucifer fell for this. And I have a picture of Lucifer right here. Right here, I can. Anyway.
You should talk here. You're too nice, cheerful.
No, I don't talk here. Well, anyway, there is a lovely picture of Lucifer in this book somewhere. Here we go.
Okay.
And here is a picture of Lucifer as pictured in this lovely book.
Yeah. Great picture of Lucifer.
The artwork in this book is good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so Lucifer was
Okay.
given the task
Oh,
of counting
I
and
know.
washing. And there he is making a little pile of a little hill out of these little grains of sand. And to this day, he's still down there counting.
Yeah. Good.
He's still down there counting each grain of sand.
That's amazing.
They don't make glass there anymore. I don't think they want to run out of sand.
All right. That's the Lucifer. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. So I think we had two from here, right?
Yeah.
So Zoom now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Carol. Okay, Terry Carp, you are up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'm just gonna quickly, these are not favorite books. This is really just what was on my shelf right now. I got these just out of the Ocean County Library where we are right now. Very nice library, by the way. This is the Cloisters. I think it's going to be some intrigue or murder mystery. I'm not sure what it's going to be. I'm only about 1/3 of the way through it, but I thought you guys might be interested in it because it's about scholars. Something bad is going to happen to the scholars working behind the scenes at the Cloisters. And I know most of you, if not all of you, have been there. So it's kind of cool to hear what they're thinking about. The second thing, I often have a fiction and a nonfiction going. This nonfiction is Christian Nationalism and the Birth of the War on Drugs. And this one is practically a page turner. I mean, usually nonfiction, the pages don't turn themselves. You actually have to do a little work, but this one is pretty good. I went 12 years to Catholic school, and I wasn't involved in or knowledgeable about Protestantism. But I learned from this book the distinction between premillennial and postmillennial. In premillennial Protestantism, the world is going to go to hell, not really hell, but the world is going to get progressively worse, chaos, wars, and then Jesus is going to come and lead us to 1,000 years of peace. It's got to get really bad. And you don't really want these people in charge, but they kind of are. As opposed to the post-millennialists who think that we have to establish Christian ethics here on earth for 1,000 years, and then Christ will come and lead. So we do all the hard work. And the Christian ethics has to do with colonialism. Oh, yeah. Because we got to spread the word. It has to do with the war, the temperance movement. Oh, yeah. Racism. Oh, yeah, yeah. But also the war on drugs is inextricably bound up and pushed by this post-millennial Christian ideal. I just can't also, I'm not going to read anything from anything, but I can also help mention that I'm on Goodreads, and I only have one friend now. Thanks, Teresa, for friending me. If you'd like to see all the books I read, you might want to get on Goodreads too. I post what I'm actually reading usually and my reading. I'd also like to draw your attention to Libby app. If you don't already know, it's the library app where you can download books to your e-reader and audiobooks. It's just terrific, terrific. I just put in a plug for Libby app. That's it.
Thank you. That was great.
And we have one more, and that's me. So I'm going to talk about an author, Anne Patchett, and 2.5 of her books. Let me just I have to change my view here for a second. Sorry, for the recording purposes. So I had read a book by Anne Patchett called Dutch House, which I absolutely loved. And I normally don't read many novels. She's a novelist and an essayist, but I loved Dutch House, so I got another of her novels. I got Commonwealth, and I found it unreadable and unbelievable. So I put it down and was rather turned off to Anne Patchett for a while. And then one day I listened to her being interviewed on the New York Times book review podcast and heard her talking about her new book, Tom Lake. And boy, I just had to go get that book. So I got it immediately. I have a Kindle, so I really can get it immediately. And I want to talk about this book, Tom Lake, because it is really among the best novels I've ever read. The title refers not to a person, but to a theater group. The book is ostensibly the story of a middle-aged mother who lives on a cherry orchard that her family owns, and they have 3 grown daughters. It takes place during COVID, and because of COVID, they can't get the pickers to come out. So the daughters are asked to come back home and help bring in the crop, the cherry crop. Now, the mother, in an earlier period of her life when she was single, had been an actress and a pretty successful one, and had been in a movie with an actor who became later a world-famous heartthrob. And of course, the grown daughters only want to talk about that actor. And the mom is willing to talk about it, but has rather mixed feelings about it, about, telling her what she's going to tell and what she's not going to tell. But really, this book is about life and the things that are important in life and the things that are not important in life. And she's moved on from the actor, but of course the daughters want to move her back and talk about nothing else. And she said in the interview that I mentioned that this book is a very Zen book in the sense that it's about living in the here and now and not being constrained by the past, not being tortured by future possibilities and whether they may come true. And I'd like to read 2 quotes from this book. There is no explaining this simple truth about life. You will forget much of it. The painful things you were certain you'd never be able to let go, now you're not entirely sure when they happened, while the thrilling parts, the heart-stopping joys, splintered and scattered and became something else. Memories are then replaced by different joys and larger sorrows, and unbelievably, those things get knocked aside as well, until one morning you're picking cherries with your 3 grown daughters, and your husband goes on the gator, which is like a tractor, and you are positive that this is all you've ever wanted in the world. And the second quote is, the past need not be so all-encompassing that it renders us incapable of making egg salad. So I finished Tom Lake and went looking for another book by her and found a book of essays called These Precious Days. I don't normally read books of essays unless they are about historical or political events, but this is an exception. This book is about friendship, love, owning a bookstore, which she does. She owns a bookstore in Tennessee. Husbands, former husbands, living in the present, and death. I can tell you there's not one unnecessary word and not one unneeded sentence. And I want to read you the highlight, a highlight from that. Sorry, one moment. And I'll have to explain this book. So she owns a bookstore, and she writes that book covers should entice readers the way roses entice bees, like their survival depended on it. Now, the reason I want to bring that up is because of this. I want to show you the book cover of These Precious Days. Now, I hope you can all see it. I can tell you that this is not a book I would ever have bought based on the cover. This book, These Precious Days, clearly is written by a woman, and her other novels are clearly written by a woman. They have a woman's voice, and I would never have bought this book given that title. But that title completely captures the essence of her personality and of what this book is about. It is a real delight. Now, I said this is about 2.5 of her books. I mentioned earlier that I had started to read another book by her called Commonwealth, but found it unreadable. You can imagine my surprise when in the interview I referred to earlier, I learned that that is her most autobiographical book. It is a fictionalized version of her life. It's a story of police families in Los Angeles, and they get split up and the kids move around, and the narrator has 3 fathers: the original father, the new father from the new marriage, then the third father from the divorce, followed by the remarriage of her mother of the last one. I found that book completely unbelievable. It is, in fact, completely autobiographical. I will tell you, I tried to read it again. I went further and still gave up. I think because I so disliked all the characters. But I'm going to go find more of her books, and that's all I have. Thank you. And there's no one else on Zoom.
So we are back to the room. Who wants to talk about it? Great, Edna.
So I'm going to make this brief since I don't have a copy of the book. It's on my Kindle and I didn't prepare anything to read from it, but it's a book by Marie Benedict called The First Ladies. And Marie Benedict writes a lot of historical fiction. So it's based on real people. And I guess she does a lot of research and puts a very readable book together. So my book club read The Personal Librarian. And since it was a very popular book, it wasn't available right away when I requested it. So I said, well, let's see what else she wrote, whether I'm going to like it. So I found Carnegie's Maid. So that one is based on another, Andrew Carnegie, and somebody who did exist in his life. And The Personal Librarian is about J.P. Morgan. I mean, it seems like these are very, wealthy people who end up in these books. But the one that's The First Ladies is about Eleanor Roosevelt. And we've all heard of her. And then there's Mary McLeod Bethune, whom I hadn't heard about. And so I'll just read a little bit about her. I don't know whether anyone else is familiar with her, but I thought this was sort of the same time period as what Gwen was telling us about back in the 1930s or so. So Mary McLeod Bethune was an American educator, philanthropist, humanitarian, womanist, and civil rights activist. Bethune founded the National Council of Negro Women in 1935, established the organization's flagship journal, Afro-American Women's Journal, and presided as president or leader for a myriad of African-American women's organizations, including the National Association for Colored Women and the National Youth Administration's division. And so these two women became friends, and it's a really beautiful relationship that, the friendship just comes through in the writing, and I'm really enjoying the book.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Yeah. Oh.
Okay, all right, so far working. Yes, I'd like to share something. as some of you know, I know Susan and David know, this year happened to be the 30th memorial for my first husband, Ralph. And one of the things I decided to do this year as an adult, we were a true May-December relationship. When we met, he was 62 and I was 22. And who thought it would work? It was it was an amazing 20 years. We had an amazing 20 years. And when we first met, he was working on his book that was called Remembering Bix, which was about a jazz musician named Bix Beiderbecke, whom he knew as a child in the 20s, who drank himself to death, basically died of self-neglect in 1931 at age 28. And he was remembering him in this book, and intertwined in the book were facts about his family and so on. And of course, it was a big thrill, you know, when I was young and the book came out and Harper and Row published it. And it was a great thing, you know, at the time. But I was busy working. I was making a living. I didn't really have time to read it. I read parts of it. I don't think I ever read the whole book. And now I'm sitting down and reading the whole book. And having lived with the man for 20 years, there are things in it that he describes about himself and his family. I mean, I knew a lot, but his family grew up in vaudeville and they traveled the Midwest. And his two older brothers were both musicians and talented and very, you know, they were very bohemian type people. And so anyway, I'm rereading the book, and it's really quite fascinating to see it now, 50, almost 50 years after the fact. It was reissued in paperback in 2020. No, 2000, sorry. So anyway, it's interesting, and I'm relishing it now in quite a different way than I would 20 years ago.
Wonderful.
And I've also read Clarissa Ward's book in the pandemic. Clarissa Ward, I can't remember the name of it. What a wonderful hero she is in reporting. Nina Totenberg's My Dinners with Ruth. And also I read Andy Borowitz, Profiles in Ignorance, all great reads. So
you want to go or no? Okay. Anybody from that side? Okay, you go.
We have a couple in Zoom.
Oh, okay. Let
Yeah, go. Okay, go ahead, Pam, and then we'll do Zoom.
and then they will go to.
Okay. In the last few months, I have really, really come to enjoy the book that everybody banned, that the schools banned, called 1984 by George Orwell.
It's a classic.
Unfortunately, I don't have the book with me, but I would like to share the gist of the book. Now, 1984 was actually written in 1945 or 46, sometime that around. And you've all heard of utopia. Utopia is a world where it's supposed to be perfect and controlled, and everybody is happy, and everybody lives an easy life. And when things go wrong, it becomes a dystopia. And so 1984 is a dystopia, not a utopia. And what happens is it takes place in England. And the government has different class parties. The most important class party to belong to is the inner party. And this is the party that the government has given everything to controlled everything by. And so in this inner party, you have no problem about food, you have housing, you have everything that you need. But what you don't have is control over your feelings, control over your body, control over anything that's not with the inner party. And the inner party people, do you remember you've heard of the expression, Big Brother is watching? This is where we get Big Brother is watching. And they are followed, everybody in the inner party is followed by a telescreen. Telescreen can pick up the person's vibes, every single twitch of their eye tells the inner party what they are thinking and what they're believing. So the story is actually a love story in the sense that this inner party government worker falls in love with another inner party woman. And they're not allowed to have sex. They're not allowed to have emotions. They're not allowed to show that they acknowledge each other. And they have this love affair, and they think they're working for Big Brother. They think they're going to support Big Brother. What it turns out is that they're not supporting Big Brother at all, but they are considered criminals because they're not within the inner party. And they have this whole love affair, and it was actually a setup by one of the inner party spies. What the point of the book, though, is can we live in a utopic world? Can we live in a world where everything is controlled by government? And the answer is no.
We do have a couple of things from Zoom. Hetty Grant wrote in the chat window, my three most recent reads that I really enjoyed: The Postcard by Anne Barrest, Kunstlers in Paradise by Kathleen Shine, and Counterfeit by Kirsten Chen. And she's currently reading My Search for Warren Harding by Robert Plunkett and A Very Stable Genius by Carol Leaning and Philip Rucker. And I want to mention Ann Patchett apparently is a favorite of many people, and including Mary Matsui, who loved Dutch House. And Teresa Forsman wrote that she has a quote from one of Ann Patchett's books, Bel Canto, pinned above her desk. It makes you wonder all the brilliant things we might have done with our lives had we only suspected what we know now. And Lucy Lettuce has her hand up. Lucy, go ahead.
Yeah, since we're talking about Ann Patchett, you mentioned that she has a bookstore in Tennessee. I think it's in or near Nashville. She is there all the time. You can just go and talk to her unless she's on a book tour or speaking engagement. She's always there and she's available to talk about her books. Yeah, Bel Canto was a favorite. I just saw Terry Karp write to everyone Bel Canto. Yeah, that's a favorite one by Ann Patchett. Ann Patchett also has, I haven't listened to it yet, so I can't supply more information, but I think she does a weekly podcast where she talks about what she's reading and her favorite books. So that must be very interesting, and I'm planning to look for that. And then on the subject of May-December marriages, my late husband was 25 years older than I. So it's interesting to me to hear about the relationship between somebody who was, when they met, 20-something and 60-something. We were 24 and 49. And we were together for 39 years and married for 36. So I'll just say when people saw us, initially they would seem very disapproving oftentimes, but all they had to do was sit down and talk to us for 15 minutes. And they would then, think, yeah, I get it. I understand why they're together. So age really can be just a number, as the cliche goes. Thanks.
Thank you, Lucy. I want to mention Ann Patchett does indeed have it's a video podcast, and you can find it on YouTube every week. It's of new books that have come out, and you're exactly right. She highlights books these are all new books, and that she likes, and then they go around to the people in the store, and usually the dog is sitting there. They have at least one. There's always at least one dog in the store, and she is extraordinarily charming, and only makes me want to read more of her books. And Teresa Foreman wrote that she's been in Nashville and it went to see Parnassus Books and Ann Patchett. No one else from Zoom.
Yeah,
Back to the meeting house.
we have time for two. Okay. After her.
After talk about Kazuo, but
Okay.
I think next time.
No, you can do something. Go ahead.
Thanks. It's like dessert, maybe. I'm a fan of Jane Austen and also historic fiction. And this author, Jill Hornby, is a scholar of Austen and a teacher. She discovered a character in the real life of Jane Austen, a woman named Anne Sharp, who worked as governess for one of Austen's nieces. The child, Austen had a bunch of brothers. One was adopted by a very wealthy family who didn't have any sons, and that family had pots of money like you see in Masterpiece Theater. And their daughter, Fanny, had this governess who was named Anne Sharp. And the author really imagines a whole biography for Sharp to account for how this accomplished woman got stuck being a governess and how she was successful as an educator for first this sort of daffy young woman who kept a journal. And so they have daily accounts of what life was like in the more well-to-do end of the Austen family for a decade. And Sharp went on to become the educator of larger groups of girls and managed to save up 2,000 pounds by the end of her life, which was gobs of money back then. And it's told in the voice of Jane Austen. This author is very diligent about her, sensitive to the humor, the wordplay, the setups. I've read a lot of pastiche Jane Austen, and this is pretty good. So I'm recommending Godmersham Park by Jill Hornby. If you like Jane Austen, it's like one more of her novels.
And the last one.
I'm not prepared at all.
Yeah,
but I
whatever.
was
Yeah,
thinking,
you don't have to.
heard the name Rabindranath
Close,
Tagore.
close.
Rabindranath Tagore is the Nobel. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature. I don't know whether you know the name or not. Is the most accomplished writer, versatile. He wrote thousands of songs. They're still popular in India. He also wrote some novels and some short stories. One of his short stories called Kabuliwala. In India, Afghans are called Kabuliwala. Because I think in the winter they come to India from Afghanistan to sell fruits, mostly dry fruits. And this is a story about a friendship developing between a 5-year-old girl and Kabuliwala, who's probably middle-aged. He had a same-age daughter like the girl. She's 5-year-old. It just sounds strange, but it's a lovely story. The human nature, fatherly love. Very heart-touching book. Not a book, it's a short story. So if you happen to come up on it, you can read it on, I guess, Google.
Yeah.
just remember, I saw the movie. It was wonderful as well. Thank you.
Yeah, it's one of the classics. Yeah, yeah. Sure. Sorry.
I just want to do a quick shout out to those of you who don't want to go to Nashville to go to a bookstore. That right here on Cedar Lane is Briar Rose Books, which is run by Howard Rose. And I have some $1 paperbacks, great for travel. And the place is filled. I mean, it's just kind of fun to be in there because floor to ceiling books, and to get to the counter, there's kind of a maze. And anyway, delightful. So. Briar Rose.
Briar Rose.
His wife named it because he was prickly.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody enjoyed this books bonanza. And,
Can you share them with us? The paperbacks?
Yeah, we can do it later. You can do it.
But
Yeah.
there's anything you want, he's got it. I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I think at this point we can do any announcement, and just 1 second, we have to. I think it's time for the ushers to get the basket around, and we also want to thank all our greeters, ushers today. That's Pam and B. Zoom coordinator was David. Hybrid and sound, Orion, and coffee is going to be done by Diane. So once again, thank you very much for being here and sharing your books. And I have a confession that I haven't read any book in last 1 year, except for some technical books. And David actually advised me not to make it an open secret, but I decided to talk about it anyways. But I thought it's very inspiring, and I will read some books now. Thank you. Thank you very much.
To learn more about us, visit our website, ethicalfocus.org, or email us at admin@ethicalfocus.org, and we'll get back to you. To make a donation, go to ethicalfocus.org/donate. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and you can watch many of our past programs on our YouTube channel.